Layer 3 chains have been absolutely exploding on crypto Twitter. Everyone's talking about them, but what are they? That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. I go through different examples of Layer 3 chains that are out there, what stacks they're built on, in this case, Arbitrum, and kind of what you can do with them and why you would even launch one in the first place. But that being said, let's jump right into it. First example, of course, a Layer 3 chain is I. You then have Proof of Play Apex, the guys running Pirate Nation on top of their chain. You have Rari Chain, the folks over at Rarible running their own chain. And of course, what everyone's talking about right now, Degen Chain, Layer 3 on top of Base. But real quick, I'm mentioning all these different chains. What are these chains? What are they built on, and why does it matter? Well, firstly, it's all built on Arbitrum Orbit. Pretty much the permissionless path for launching customizable, dedicated chains using Arbitrum technology. You can kind of look at it as like the future of consumer crypto, maybe, or even the haven for all app chains looking to scale to infinity and beyond. But enough with the marketing. How can we launch a Layer 3 chain? Where can we launch it? How does that work? Well, there are a couple of different ways you can look at it. So there are mainly two ways. The first is launching a Layer 3, and most of them will do this, launching a Layer 3 on top of Arbitrum 1. Again, full complete ownership over it. You can modify it however you want and do whatever you want with it. You essentially have a license to do whatever you want with your chain, right? It's all yours. You then have the option to launch it on Ethereum or a different Rollup, a different Layer 2, essentially. And in this case, if you were to do that, so it would be a Layer 2 or a Layer 3, depending on where you launch it, you could technically have to pay 10% of the free revenue back to the DAO. So in this case, 8% would go to the DAO treasury, and I think it's 2% would actually go to essentially, and I think I have it right here, 2% will be reserved for teams contributing to building out the Arbitrum stack. So pretty much core contributors to the Arbitrum stack. Similar to how you kind of have core contributors to Ethereum, technically right now, right? But there are, and I mentioned all that stuff, and it's like, okay, you can launch it on Arbitrum 1, you can launch it on a different Layer 2, you can launch it on Ethereum. Okay, what else? Well, you can also technically pick the architecture for it. So if you look down here, there's actually two different types of architectures you can have. You can either be a Rollup or an Anytrust chain. Most Layer 2s, most Layer 3s, people know them as rollups. So, kind of the whole, the optimistic rollups in this case. 7-day waiting period to go back to Ethereum. But you kind of get that security of fraud proofs. Arbitrum being, of course, the only system that currently has fraud proofs live today. But that being said, you also have Anytrust chains. And you can kind of look at it as more of like an alt DA structure, if you will. I think I actually have it over here. It's similar to kind of how you can have technically a whole bunch of different validators storing the information back to, storing it offline, I should say, not back to Ethereum, but storing it offline. It essentially allows for a lot cheaper transactions versus if you were to have it on Ethereum directly. Obviously, with EIP 4844, a lot of the transactions on rollups have become very, very cheap, almost even close to Anytrust levels. But at the end of the day, given that there's enough demand across all Layer 2s, and I think we're already starting to see it, fees will eventually rise no matter what. So that's why alt DA structures do help quite a bit in that case. But in that case, we have the architectures, we have where you can launch the chains. What can you do with them, right? Like, what do you have automatically included, I should say? Because that's what I was mentioning earlier. One of the things that I think a lot of people like is that the block times for Arbitrum are extremely, extremely quick. Currently, I think most rollups average around like a couple of seconds for block time, essentially. So you have to wait a couple of seconds for your transaction to actually be included. So transaction speed is kind of relatively low. I should say relatively long, I should say. Whereas you have Arbitrum Orbit chains, or Arbitrum chains in general, have a transaction of a block time around 250 milliseconds. So that's literally about a quarter of a second, block time, essentially, you have for Arbitrum chains. That can go to as low as about, I think it's 100 milliseconds. So here, just as a little example, Degen, the Layer 3 chain, launched on Base the other day, of course, using the Arbitrum stack. But in this case, Pop Punk on chain from Gaslight, he mentioned that it took 0.147 seconds to confirm the transaction. But the crazier thing is how cheap it was. The transaction was literally, I don't even know, how do you say this number? It's like a thousandth of an eighth of a thousandth. I don't even know. I took math, but I kind of forgot how to say these numbers with the decimals, all that, when it's that low. But nonetheless, the point here is that you have extremely fast block times. I think that actually rival even other L1s. I think it might even be the fastest block time out there currently. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. but also it can go down lower than that to, like I said, 100 milliseconds. And because it's layer 3, you have the extra ability of just having extremely low costs. And I think in this case, the degen chain actually is using the Anytrust model. So they do have their own probably data availability committee that's storing all that stuff offline. I might have said validator earlier, by the way, but it's referred to as the data availability committee. And then of course, I mentioned it earlier, but you also have the whole idea that you're using the Nitro stack, right? It's fully built out with fraud proofs. The only optimistic rollup today that has it, and the only general purpose optimistic rollup that has stage 1 decentralization. Later on down the year, you're going to see Bold, which is essentially, I think it's like bounded liquidity delay, which is literally just kind of like a fancy kind of term to say that you can have permissionless fraud proofs on Arbitrum chains this year. And that's, I should say it's slated for this year, so I think it should still be coming this year. But it'll essentially allow for Arbitrum chains to essentially become stage 2, hit stage 2 decentralization. So, essentially, as it currently stands, the Arbitrum stack is like, just like at its current state, not including any modifications, is essentially as mature as a rollup can get and as efficient as a rollup can get. But none of that includes, of course, the modifications, the customizations, the things that everyone likes. So we're going to go ahead and go down here. There's a couple different things that people like. I'm going to run through some of the more important ones that I think people might like. And then there's also a ton more that are here that I'm not going to list, but I'll just go through them pretty quick just for the sake of time. Number one is a custom fee token. And it's actually part of the reason why degen chain, who is built on Base, chose the Arbitrum stack to build on top of. A, because they can, but B, because they have the ability to use degen, which is an ERC20 that was originally, I think, deployed on Base, as their fee token for their layer 3, of course, built with Arbitrum. So you have that, which is, and by the way, that's natively kind of integrated versus kind of like, I know some other stacks, currently, if they do have custom fee token models, it's like built on after the fact. It's not at the protocol level, which is really important, obviously. But you have the ability to use account abstraction. So some chains, for example, might want to just they might not even want people to like even touch like a wallet or anything like that. I think Proof of Play Apex does a really good job at that. They have the game Pirate Nation. You can log in with essentially like an email or anything like that, and pretty much play the game as if you never touched the chain at all. So you can kind of abstract that entire process away, which is great for, by the way, of course, consumer apps, right? You can have chains that have permission to access, so pretty much general purpose at layer 3s or app chains. I think most layer 3s will become app chains, to be honest, but not, either way, you can still have both, either or. Degen chain, I think, technically is a general purpose, while Proof of Play Apex is actually an app chain. This is an example. And then lastly, again, just something that I'll mention here as well, customizable protocol logic. So without getting too deep into it, you essentially have the ability to upgrade and do whatever you want with your system, right? Obviously, Arbitrum chain will continue to see upgrades over time, continue to see improvements in line with what's going on with Ethereum, but in line just in general with what core developers are creating for the chain itself. So you're free to implement those, not implement them, do whatever you want. But you also have the ability to just like go as crazy as you want. For example, there is I think it's a layer 2 actually. I could be wrong. Layer 2 or layer 3, I'm not sure. But they're called Phoenix, and they're essentially building an encrypted blockchain using Arbitrum technology. So fully homomorphic encryption, I think, is the way is a term that I'm looking for here. But it's like a privacy-based blockchain, which is really cool. Again, all done using the Arbitrum stack. And of course, they're able to do that because they have complete ownership over the thing. Pretty nice. But the two things that are really important that I'm going to slowly start to end the video off with, one is actually going to be Stylus. And essentially Stylus is the ability to write smart contracts in Rust, C, C++. You can kind of look at it as like alt VM support. It's essentially having the ability to have the EVM, but also a WASM VM. Anything that compiles on the WASM essentially can be used as code when you're writing smart contracts in this language. But the cool thing is that it's fully interoperable with Solidity smart contracts. So you could have, let's say, for example, you wanted to fork Uniswap and put it on your chain or your Orbit chain, layer 3, whatever. Assuming you had the Stylus upgrade implemented when it's mainnet ready, you're able to literally write something in Rust and have it communicate with the Solidity-based battle-tested Uniswap smart contract that you might have forked. It's pretty cool stuff. And again, obviously, this is stuff that, as it relates to Arbitrum 1 or Arbitrum Nova, all that stuff does have to go through a governance, kind of process because those are public chains governed by the DAO, while layer 3s, you can do whatever you want with them, right? They're completely your chain. There's that, and there's also chain clusters. I don't have any fancy graphic for chain clusters, but it's essentially currently in research, and it's the ability to have essentially cross-chain interoperability between multiple Arbitrum chains, kind of like a handful of them. So that's currently in research. It's probably, I don't think it's anywhere near launching this year, but it's something that I think the Offchain Labs team is working on. But that being said, I wanted to keep the video short, so I think I'll keep it there. But if you're interested in playing around with Orbit, you can definitely feel free to use the custom Orbit deployment tool that I'll leave in the description below. I think you can actually launch one on testnet or devnet. With using that, choose your own token, choose your own modifications, do all that stuff from like a very easy UI. But if you're looking to launch a mainnet as well, you can get in contact with Caldera, Conduit, AltLayer, or any RAS who supports Arbitrum Orbit deployment. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, we'll keep the next videos will be Arbitrum ecosystem updates, but I figured let's talk about layer 3s today because everyone's talking about them over the past couple days. But that being said, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.